Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's talk about artificial intelligence, but, probably not in the way you're used to hearing about it. We're not going to get lost in all the jargon about neural networks or large language models today. Nope. Instead, we're going to talk about us, about humans, because AI, it isn't just the next big tech gadget. It is a massive, profound challenge to our very idea of what it means to be human. I mean, think about it for a second. For all of history, we've defined ourselves by the things that make us special, right? Our ability to reason, to create art, to feel, to make these big moral judgments. But now, right now, we are building machines that are starting to do all of those things. So this moment that we're all living through, it's way more than just another tech shift. It's not just changing our tools, it's changing us. It's forcing us to ask these huge questions we've never really had to face on a global scale before. So to get through this new world, to navigate this totally new territory we're all mapping out in real time, we don't just need better code. We don't just need more powerful processors. We need a better philosophy. We need to build a new compass. And this, right here, this is the fundamental question of our time. It kind of just hangs in the air every single time you read about a new AI breakthrough, doesn't it? And let's be really, really clear about what kind of question this is. The answer isn't hiding in lines of code, and you can't measure it in gigabytes. It's a question about value and purpose and meaning. For centuries, our values seemed, obvious. We were the thinkers, the dreamers, the deciders. That was our gig. But if a machine can compose a symphony that literally moves you to tears, or cook up a legal strategy that wins a huge case, or even just provide a comforting chat at the end of a really long day, then we have to stop and reevaluate. What is the source of our worth if it isn't our unique intelligence? To find the answer, we're not going to look at a circuit board. We're going to look to history. Because a crisis almost exactly like this one, a moment where technology just shattered our sense of place in the universe, has happened before. So here's our roadmap for this explainer, our game plan, if you will. We're going to start with that historical echo to really get the foundations of what's happening right now. Then we'll dive in and dissect 3 of the biggest, most immediate challenges that AI is throwing at us, to our jobs, our friendships, and our whole sense of right and wrong. And finally, we'll look at the tools we can pull together to forge that new philosophical compass, one that's sturdy enough to actually guide us through the wild territory ahead.
All right, so let's jump in our time machine for a minute. To really get the depth of the AI revolution, we have to understand its historical twin, the Industrial Revolution back in the 19th century. Now, this era wasn't just about cool new factories and railroads. It was a time of just massive social and psychological chaos that led to a full-blown crisis of meaning for the entire Western world.
The parallel between these two times is, it's pretty striking, and it's worth sitting with for a second. Back in the 19th century, steam and steel just turned everything upside down. For thousands of years, the rhythm of life was tied to the seasons, to the farm. It was local and steeped in tradition, and then boom, suddenly that was all gone. People left the farms their families had worked for generations and flooded into these new, chaotic, and honestly, pretty brutal cities. They went from being skilled artisans who took pride in their craft and controlled their own work to becoming literal cogs in a machine, doing the same repetitive task over and over, completely disconnected from what they were making. And at the exact same time, you had the scientific worldview just taking over. Darwin, geology, physics, they seemed to be explaining the world without any need for God. And so the traditional religious beliefs that had given people purpose and a moral framework, they started to crumble, leaving this huge spiritual vacuum. Now, this is maybe one of the most famous and most misunderstood things ever said in philosophy. When Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead," he wasn't, pumping his fist in celebration. He was sounding an alarm bell. It was a cultural diagnosis. He saw that the belief in the Christian God, which had been the bedrock for all of Western morality, meaning, and value for over 1,000 years, had just become unbelievable to the modern mind. "We have killed him," he says, which means our own science, our own rationalism, had made that foundation obsolete. He wasn't even arguing about whether God existed or not. He was saying our belief in him was gone, and he saw the absolutely terrifying consequences of that. Without that central, transcendent source of value, where do our morals come from? What stops us from falling into what he called nihilism, that creeping, awful suspicion that all values are made up, that there's no ultimate purpose, and that life itself is totally meaningless?
But here's the thing about Nietzsche. He didn't just point out the problem and walk away. He proposed a really radical solution. He argued that humanity was at a crossroads. We could either give in to the despair of nihilism, or we could take on the hardest job imaginable, creating our own values. If meaning wasn't going to be handed to us from the outside anymore, from God or from tradition, then we had to build it from within. This is the whole idea behind his concept of the Übermensch, or the overman. Now, this is not a tyrant, not a master race. That was a tragic misinterpretation that came later. For Nietzsche, the Übermensch is a spiritual goal. It's an individual who has the incredible courage to say no to herd morality, the comfy secondhand values of the crowd, and to stare into a meaningless universe without blinking. This person, through a powerful creative drive he called the will to power, would then forge their own set of values, living a life so full and so affirmed that they'd be happy to live it over and over again forever. It was a philosophy for the individual, standing strong and alone in a chaotic new industrial world. Okay, this table right here, this is the core of it all. It shows why our current crisis is both so similar to and so dangerously different from the last one. Let's just walk through it. First, labor. The Industrial Revolution replaced our muscles with machines. The AI revolution is starting to automate our minds, our ability to write, to reason, to create. Second, power. In the 19th century, power was visible. You could point right at the factory owner, the guy who owned the machines. Today, power is often invisible, right? It's hidden inside these secret algorithms and giant piles of data controlled by just a few tech platforms. Third, the existential crisis. The first one was, God is dead. We lost our connection to something divine and external. Our crisis today is more like, human uniqueness is dead. The fear that our own special cognitive abilities are just a really complicated form of computation and that they're about to be surpassed. And finally, the ethical challenges. Back then, people were fighting over things you could see: fair wages, safe workplaces, the massive gap between rich and poor. Today's challenges are sneakier: hidden biases in code that create injustice, the slow-motion death of privacy, and handing over moral decisions to a machine. The takeaway here is really clear. Nietzsche's philosophy for the lone individual is an amazing place to start, but it's just not enough for a crisis this systemic, this invisible, and this cognitive.
So let's take this framework and apply it to our first huge challenge: the future of work. For the last couple of centuries, our identity in the modern world has been completely wrapped up in our job title. It's usually the first question you ask someone new, right? So what do you do? Our work gives us our daily structure, our social standing, and for a lot of us, our core sense of purpose. But what happens when that anchor just disappears? This number, it's so much more than just an economic forecast. It represents a massive identity crisis, just looming on a global scale. And, unlike in the past, the jobs at risk aren't just the manual or repetitive ones. We're talking about jobs we always thought were safe, the jobs that define the professional class: lawyers, accountants, designers, coders, even doctors. In our society, work is the central pillar of who you are. It decides where you live, who your friends are, and how you see your own worth. To have that taken away isn't just about losing a paycheck. For a lot of people, it's about losing their very place in the world, feeling useless in the deepest sense of the word. This is a psychological challenge just as much as it is an economic one. Now, a pure Nietzschean response would be to look at this crisis and say, awesome, this is an opportunity. It's a chance to free ourselves from the 9-to-5 grind and become that Übermensch, an individual who defines their own worth completely outside of a job title. You could find value in raising a family, or creating art, or learning a new skill, or helping your community. And that is an incredibly inspiring and powerful idea on a personal level. It really is. But it's also a dangerously incomplete answer to the problem we're all facing. An individual's powerful will to create their own meaning can't by itself rewrite economic policy to support millions of displaced people. It can't build new schools to get us ready for a post-work world. It can't regulate the handful of giant companies that control all the AI. It's an isolated individual solution for what is a deeply collective and systemic problem.
So this leaves us with what you might call a trilemma. 3 competing visions, 3 possible paths forward. The first path is that lone Nietzschean creator. It's that romantic idea of the entrepreneur, the artist, the solo thinker making their own way. It's a really compelling vision, but it could also be a very lonely and insecure one in a world without any economic safety nets. The second path is the post-work ideal. This line of thinking says we should be actively trying to build a society where human value is finally completely separated from labor. This vision is often supported by things like universal basic income, or UBI. The idea is to give everyone a financial floor, freeing them up to do other meaningful things. But real-world experiments with UBI everywhere, from Kenya to the US, have had really mixed results. It's not a simple fix. Then there's the third path, what we could call the enhanced cyborg, which is all about human-AI collaboration. In this future, our value isn't replaced by AI, but it's defined by how well we work with it. Think of a scientist using AI to crunch genomic data at a speed no human ever could, or an architect using AI to brainstorm thousands of sustainable building designs. This path doesn't get rid of work, it just completely redefines it, turning AI into a partner instead of a replacement.
Okay, on to our second big challenge, And this one isn't some future prediction. It is happening right now, in our pockets, on our screens, every single day. We live in an age of just insane connection. We can talk to anyone, anywhere, at any time. We have all of human knowledge in the palm of our hands. And yet, study after study shows that loneliness, anxiety, and social isolation are all on the rise. We've never been more connected, and we have never felt more alone. So what is going on? This concept right here is at the very heart of the problem. We are more and more outsourcing our need for connection to technology. And we're replacing these messy, difficult, but ultimately amazing human relationships with a frictionless substitute, algorithmic intimacy. Think about it. It's the recommendation algorithm on Spotify that gets your taste in music better than your best friend. It's the social media feed that creates this perfect little echo chamber where you feel completely seen and understood. It's the AI chatbot companion that's there for you 24/7, never argues, never has a bad day, and is always supportive. The danger is that this perfect on-demand companionship is a one-way street. It gives you the feeling of intimacy without any of the hard work a real relationship requires. It makes us less patient with real people and their flaws, less willing to do the tough work of empathy, and less able to handle the friction that's just a normal part of our real complicated lives.
Nietzsche, with his whole thing about authenticity and his disgust for the herd, would have some pretty strong words for us here. He'd tell us, face your loneliness with courage. Go seek out authentic, difficult, real experiences over shallow, fake connections. Reject the easy comfort of the crowd for the strength that comes from real friendship. And that is powerful, timeless advice. But he could never have imagined a world where the herd is an algorithm. He never envisioned a system that was designed by thousands of the world's smartest engineers with the sole purpose of capturing our attention and shaping our desires for profit. The challenge today isn't just resisting peer pressure. It's resisting a personalized, adaptive, and invisible system that's sitting in the middle of our most intimate relationships. We need more than just individual courage. We need a whole new ethic for relationships in the digital age.
And this is where we can find a really powerful potential antidote in a different school of thought, care ethics. In a lot of ways, care ethics is the philosophical opposite of an algorithm. An algorithm runs on abstract universal rules. It sees you as a pile of data points to be optimized for a goal, like getting you to click or watch one more video. It's impartial and totally impersonal. Care ethics demands the exact opposite. It argues that morality isn't found in abstract rules, but in the specific, messy reality of human relationships. It asks us to focus on the real, vulnerable person right in front of us. It champions interdependence over radical independence, and it recognizes our responsibilities to each other. It's a philosophy that values the inefficient, time-consuming, but deeply meaningful work of actually caring for other people. All right, this brings us to what might be the most daunting challenge of them all. Quietly, without much of a public discussion, we're handing over our moral and ethical judgments to automated systems. We're letting them make decisions that have a huge impact on people's lives, from who gets a loan, to who gets a job interview, to who's considered a high risk for parole. And we're giving these decisions to algorithms that we, and often even the people who made them, don't really understand. And this isn't some sci-fi question about the future. This is happening right now, today. Many of the most powerful AIs are what we call black boxes. That just means they're so complex that even the engineers who built them can't fully explain the exact reason for any one decision. The system just learns from tons of data and finds patterns that humans can't see. So when it spits out a decision, there's no clear chain of moral reasoning you can go back and check. This creates a really dangerous vacuum of responsibility. The programmer can blame the data, the company can blame the algorithm. Nobody is really held accountable. And that leads to this new, sneaky kind of nihilism. If we don't know the moral logic behind the decisions that are running our lives, then in a very real sense, there is no moral logic. There's just the machine's output. To get our heads around this new kind of power, the work of the philosopher Michel Foucault is super helpful. Foucault studied how power works in society, and he would say we're in the middle of a huge shift. Old power was like a guard in a watchtower, a visible authority that watched you and could punish you. This new form of power, let's call it algorithmic governmentality, is much more subtle. It isn't just watching you, it's actively shaping your world to guide your behavior. I mean, think about it. Your search results, your newsfeed, the products it recommends, the route your GPS gives you. None of that is neutral. It's all a personalized environment designed to gently nudge your choices, shape your opinions, and even create your desires. It's a form of control that doesn't feel like oppression. It feels like convenience. It feels like personalization. And this new kind of power creates the perfect setup for an ethical trap that the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith. The core of Sartre's whole philosophy is this idea of radical freedom. He said we are condemned to be free. We are responsible for every choice we make. Bad faith is when we lie to ourselves to try and escape that terrifying freedom. It's when we pretend we're just an object, a thing, with no choice, just pushed around by outside forces. In blaming the algorithm, that might be the ultimate act of modern bad faith. To say, hey, the algorithm made the decision, is to just give up our human freedom and our moral responsibility. An ethic inspired by Sartre would tell us to fiercely reject that excuse. It would insist that at the end of every single algorithmic chain, a human being has to be held responsible. Period. Okay, so we've traveled back to the 19th century, and we've seen the crisis echo from the past. We've dissected the unique and really complex challenges that AI is throwing at our work, our relationships, and our moral agency right now. And we've seen that Nietzsche's powerful individualism gave us a fantastic starting point, but it's just not enough to handle the systemic, invisible forces of this new revolution. So where does that leave us? Well, we can't just pull a single old map off the shelf. The terrain is way too new. We have to forge a new compass. And the answer isn't going to be one single grand, perfect philosophy. It's going to be a composite, more like a practical toolkit of ideas. It's what we might call a techno-humanistic ethic. It's techno because it has to be grounded in a really clear-eyed, realistic understanding of how this tech actually works. We can't be naive about it. And it's humanistic because it has to be rooted in the deep wisdom of the humanities, which for thousands of years have been asking the big questions about what it means to be a good person and how to live a good life. This composite ethic has to help us answer two massive questions at the same time. Who am I as a free and responsible person? And how do we want to live together in a fair and flourishing society? So here it is, our new compass, built from four essential pillars. First, the existentialist pillar, from thinkers like Nietzsche and Sartre. This is our shield against bad faith. It's a constant reminder that we are free and we are responsible for the world we build with our technology. Second, the structural pillar, inspired by Foucault. This is our X-ray vision. It helps us see how power is working invisibly through these new systems, so we can push back instead of just being passively shaped by them. Third, the relational pillar, built on care ethics. This is our anchor to each other. It insists that we always put the messy, real needs of human beings ahead of the clean, abstract efficiency of machine. And finally, the phenomenological pillar. This school of thought defends the value of our lived, messy, embodied experience. It's a crucial reminder that a human life is not just a bunch of data points to be measured and optimized. It is rich and meaningful, and often you can't even quantify it. And that is a value we absolutely must protect. And you know, the really good news is, this isn't just some abstract theory. Our philosophical compass is already guiding actual, concrete action in the tech world. Practical frameworks are popping up that try to put these values into practice. You have human-centered AI, which is an approach that says the #1 goal of any AI system has to be serving human needs. Then there's value-sensitive design, which is a method for baking human values like privacy and fairness right into the tech from the very beginning, not just slapping it on as an afterthought. And then there's constitutional AI, which is a really new technique where you train models not just on data, but on a set of explicit ethical rules, like a constitution, to guide how they behave. These are all attempts to put our philosophy right into the code, but they all lead us to one final, inescapable question.
This, at the end of the day, is the question. Who gets to write the constitution for our artificial intelligence? Which values do we code into it? Whose idea of a good life do we tell it to optimize for? This is not a technical problem to be solved by engineers in a lab. It is the most important human conversation of our time, a conversation about what we truly value, what we refuse to give up, what parts of our flawed, messy, beautiful human experience are absolutely not negotiable. The most important task we have is not building the next great algorithm. It's creating the spaces where we can have that conversation together. Thanks for watching.